Governor Johnson, good to be with you today.
Yeah, good to be with you. It's good to be in Wisconsin. I have vacationed here for, gosh, I don't know, 8 years in a row. We spent over a week every year in Wisconsin.
Why is the state important to you politically? Why are you investing time and energy in Wisconsin right now?
Well, every state, so not unique to Wisconsin. I think that that every state has the same concerns, and that we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think we might actually win the race. But
you're serious about that. You said at your rally the other night, it's a crazy election year, crazy enough that I'm going to be elected president. You think that could happen?
Well, I do, and it's because Trump and Clinton are so polarizing, and as a third choice, two former Republican governors that served 2 terms each in heavily Democrat states by being fiscally conservative, socially inclusive. You know, what's that animal look like? Well, that animal is something that I think has great appeal right now in this country.
You need 15% in the major national polls to get into the debates. Are you running out of time on that goal?
Well, the clock keeps ticking, and the polls are ratcheting up. And we just 1 week ago started spending money. Wisconsin being one of those states where we're spending money to actually advertise. So maybe, maybe not. I mean, it's close.
It's close. And right now, your numbers tell you what, about 8 to 10% is where you are in the polls right now?
Actually, the 5 polls that the Presidential Debate Commission has identified were right at 10. Not 9.9, not 10.1, but 10 in those 5 polls.
You hit on something that I want to ask you about, and the fact that we have seen historically high negatives connected to Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Given that, are you surprised you aren't doing better, since you do present a third option to voters who are not happy with the other 2 major options?
Actually, Mike, the biggest hurdle right now is that we're not, my name is not being included in any polls. In other words, not one poll is being conducted nationally where it's Johnson, Trump, and Clinton. If that were the case, tomorrow I'd be at 20%, and a lot of that having to do with, gee, there is a third choice. So in maybe about 50% of the polls right now that are being conducted, I'm the third question on the list. And then 99% of the media, and I'm not saying you're guilty, but you are guilty in that you just report the top line. 70% of Americans don't even know that there's a third choice in this race. And so that's the opportunity. I mean, this is high risk, high reward. But if people actually knew that there was a third choice, and that third choice was encompassed 2 very successful governors that unquestionably made a positive difference in their states.
So for people who are still thinking about where they want to land in this presidential election, for people who say, I cannot vote for Donald Trump, but I still think I'm a Republican, what do you offer them?
Well, honesty, telling the truth, keeping your word. I think the unforgivable in life is hypocrisy. Saying one thing and doing another. Bill Weld and myself are not hypocrites. We did make a difference in our states, and that we align philosophically with most Americans. Speaking broadly, that's being fiscally conservative, small government, lower taxes. That's being socially inclusive, always coming down on the side of you and I being able to make choices in our own lives, always, as long as those choices don't put others in harm's way. And I think that the majority of Americans are skeptical that when it comes to our military interventions, that the world is any more safe as a result of those interventions. When we involve ourselves in regime change, it has resulted in the situation that we have today. We're the only candidates that do believe in free trade, believing that it will result in more U.S. jobs, not less U.S. jobs, and that we do have some issues globally, but we need to join diplomatically, specifically with Russia to deal with Syria. Specifically, we need to join hands with China to deal with North Korea.
I want to pick up on some of those points. Let's talk about trade for a moment, because you're in a state where there are people in Wisconsin who believe that free trade has not been a good thing for the Wisconsin worker, that the Wisconsin worker has suffered, that manufacturing jobs have moved out of this country. How do you sell what you're talking about to a fair number of people who are very skeptical of free trade agreements?
Well, what you just pointed out is most of America right now that associates crony capitalism, which is bad, government interference, government picking winners and losers, and equating crony capitalism and free trade as one and the same, when in fact they're opposites. And that's an education, really, that needs to take place. Free trade, devoid of government influence, devoid of government picking winners and losers, and that really the aversion that we have to these trade agreements is that they are laced with favoritism. That individuals, groups have paid for that favoritism, giving them more influence and more money, as opposed to equal opportunity. So free trade is really about equal opportunity, and when given equal opportunity, we thrive. This is more U.S. jobs, not less U.S. jobs.
Immigration, I think I saw you and Governor Weld at a forum where you said we're about as pro-immigration as you can get. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. The Wharton School of Business, 3 weeks ago, they came out with an analysis of immigration. If we restrict immigration, it's going to have, this came from the Wharton School of Business. That was Donald Trump's alma mater. That said, restricting immigration would have a negative impact on the economy. Allowing for high-skilled workers to come into this country would have a small positive impact on our company, but increasing immigration would actually have a very positive impact on our economy. So I think that we should embrace immigration in this country. We are a country of immigrants. We should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. And a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card that applicable taxes get paid. 11 million undocumented workers in this country, great misunderstanding on why that exists in the first place. It exists because the government has made it impossible to come into this country and work, to take jobs that U.S. citizens don't want. And because of that, if you or I were in the same situation, we would be doing the same thing to benefit our families. And workers coming across the border from Mexico, cream of the crop when it comes to workers, hard-working individuals, and that undocumented workers go back 20, 30 years in this country. And if we were to deport 11 million undocumented workers, it would be an economic catastrophe. Building a wall across the border is crazy, and I'm speaking as a border governor.
I was going to say, you seem genuinely offended by some of the rhetoric from Donald Trump.
I am absolutely offended, and it is offensive. It's offensive to 48%. New Mexico has the highest percentage Hispanic population of any state in the United States. About 50% of New Mexico is Hispanic. How is the crackdown of 11 million undocumented workers going to take place in New Mexico? And literally, is it going to be a knock on the door, and if you're Hispanic, you're going to have to provide papers? That's how it's going to have to work, and it's going to be dragging families that own homes from those homes back to Mexico, where they haven't been for 30 years.
I want to ask you the question that you get so often, and I ask it maybe a little differently. And this is the marijuana question, because you're as governor, you came out and you said, I favor the legalization of marijuana. I've used marijuana recreationally. I see people like Mitt Romney, the former Republican nominee, say, you know, I would consider voting for the Libertarian candidate, but this marijuana thing just doesn't play with me.
And let's see, 60% of Americans now support legalizing marijuana. And legalizing marijuana, we have tens of millions of Americans in this country who are convicted felons that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. And I refuse to believe that we are any less law-abiding in this country than any other country. Roots of that in the drug war, the war on drugs. So let's bring an end to the war on drugs. I think that by legalizing marijuana, that the world becomes a better place. Marijuana on the medicinal side directly competes with legal prescription drugs that kill 30,000 people a year. Not one documented death from marijuana. And I've always believed that legalizing marijuana will lead to less overall substance abuse because it's so much safer than everything else that's out there, starting with alcohol. The campaign to legalize marijuana in Colorado was a campaign based on marijuana is safer than alcohol. So Mitt Romney is in the 40% of Americans now that still want to criminalize the use of marijuana. And hey, for somebody that wants to not use marijuana, fine, this is personal choice. But for someone who decides that they want to use marijuana, take the edge off at the end of the day by using marijuana as opposed to alcohol, why begrudge them that? As long as they're not going to do harm to others. So getting behind the wheel of a car impaired, that's where government has a role.
I'll bring this full circle and end with this question. It really, for you at this moment in this campaign, is all about getting into the debates, isn't it?
It is. There's no way to win the presidency without being in the debates. It's estimated that the audience for the first presidential debate is going to exceed that of the Super Bowl. Well, you can't win the Super Bowl if you're not in it.
Former Governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for president. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Mike, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.